Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a story that is honestly one of the most fascinating and surprisingly relatable pieces of human history. When we picture prehistoric times, we usually imagine early humans just scraping by, right? Hunting, gathering, staying put in small, isolated tribes. But what if I told you that long before the pyramids were even a rough sketch, our ancestors were already running complex international commerce? They were risking their lives across treacherous oceans and even dealing with incredibly modern problems like supply chain shortages and, get this, luxury brand counterfeiting. It's an incredible story of ancient human connection, and it completely flips the script on how we view prehistoric societies.
So, let's set the stage. I want you to take a second and actually guess the answer to this question. How old is the history of international maritime trade in the United Arab Emirates and the wider Arabian Peninsula? Really think about it. Are we talking about the Roman Empire, maybe the Bronze Age? When exactly did people first start braving the open waters of the Arabian Gulf to trade with distant lands?
Okay, let's dive into this. The answer is 7,500 years ago. Yeah, 7,500. This dates all the way back to what archaeologists call the Ubaid period, around 5500 BC. To put that into perspective, over in Mesopotamia, which is modern-day Iraq, people were literally just starting to figure out early farming villages. And yet, at the absolute dawn of human civilization as we know it, these people had already built a massive, active maritime trade network, linking them straight to the nomadic peoples living in the modern-day UAE.
Section 1, the 1,000-kilometer journey. And trust me, this was not your average ship.
I mean, the distance between Mesopotamia and the UAE is well over 1,000 kilometers of rough, unpredictable ocean. So how did they pull this off? Well, if you're picturing majestic wooden galleons or some sturdy Viking-style longship, think again. They simply didn't have the timber or the tech for that. Instead, their main ride across 1,000 kilometers of ocean was a reed bundle boat. They literally took giant bundles of grass, tied them tightly together, and built a hull. And if you look closely at ancient etchings from the era, you can actually spot a boat with what clearly looks like a mast. That indicates they were already using early sailing technology and harnessing the wind to navigate those dangerous waters.
Now you might be wondering exactly what I was wondering. How does a boat made of grass not just instantly soak up the seawater and sink to the bottom? So the crucial point here is this absolute marvel of ancient engineering called bitumen. Bitumen is essentially a natural asphalt. The Mesopotamians figured out that if you take this sticky, tar-like stuff and smear it on as a thick coating, it acts as a highly effective, super durable waterproofing technology for their prehistoric ships. To actually build one of these things, the Mesopotamians used a pretty genius three-step manufacturing process. Step 1, bundle the reeds tightly together to create the buoyant shape of the hull. Step 2, tie them incredibly securely with thick ropes so the ocean currents don't just rip the whole thing apart. And finally, step 3, coat the entire exterior heavily with that natural bitumen. That thick layer of asphalt was the absolute secret to keeping these reed boats afloat. It literally turned a pile of tied-up grass into a seaworthy vessel that could survive a 1,000-kilometer voyage.
And we don't even have to guess if this actually worked, because we have the hard evidence. At a major ancient trade hub in Kuwait, known as the H3 site, which served as this crucial pit stop on the way to the UAE, archaeologists found heaps of these bitumen fragments. And the sensory details on these things are just incredible. On the inner side of the fragments, you can still see the clear physical impressions left behind by the woven reeds and thick ropes. But flip them over to the side that faced the water, they are completely covered in fossilized ocean barnacles. It's wild. It stands as the absolute oldest direct evidence of ocean-faring boats ever discovered in human archaeology.
Moving on to Section 2, Prehistoric Barter, Pearls for Luxury.
So, why risk your life on a 1,000-kilometer ocean trip in a grass boat? The answer was a massively lucrative exchange of complementary regional goods. Up north in Mesopotamia, they were manufacturing high-end luxury items. Their biggest export was Ubaid pottery, these gorgeous, delicate vessels with a light green base and beautiful black geometric patterns. Meanwhile, down in the UAE, the local nomadic tribes didn't have kilns for fine pottery, but they were incredibly rich in marine resources. The shallow waters of the Arabian Gulf were famous for pearl oysters. So the UAE exported these stunning natural pearls, intricately carved pearl shell buttons, turtle shells, and tons of dried fish. It was a perfect match. The Mesopotamians wanted the jewels of the sea, and the people of the UAE wanted the manufactured luxury of the north.
And this brilliantly illustrates the dynamic between the two cultures. We find this incredibly elegant, finely crafted Ubaid pottery
discarded in sandy excavation sites in the UAE, just sitting right there in the middle of massive heaps of fish bones left by these ancient nomadic fishermen. To the people living a rugged life on the UAE coast, these delicate bowls and jugs weren't just everyday dishes for holding food. They were the ultimate imported luxury goods, a massive status symbol brought in from a world away.
Which brings us to Section 3, humanity's very first counterfeit incident.
Okay, so we've established that this Ubaid pottery was essentially the designer handbag of 5500 BC. But there was a massive bottleneck. You only got these goods if a reed boat actually survived the 1,000-kilometer journey. The prehistoric demand for this luxury item completely outstripped the incredibly slow, incredibly dangerous supply chain. So what do humans do when they want a luxury brand they can't easily get? They fake it. This is an actual prehistoric knockoff found at the Dalma Island site in the UAE. The locals couldn't get enough of the real Ubaid pottery, so they just made their own. They didn't have the right clay or the advanced kilns, so they used what they did have, local plaster. They sculpted vessels out of plaster, and then, in a true stroke of counterfeit genius, they painted them with the exact same black chevron and geometric patterns as the authentic Mesopotamian imports. The material and the baking methods were totally wrong, but visually they were trying to perfectly mimic those rare luxury goods.
All of this leads to a pretty wild thought. It is absolutely mind-blowing to realize that this Ubaid-era network was humanity's first real maritime cultural exchange. They weren't just swapping calories to survive, they were sharing designs, aesthetics, and culture. Looking at those fake plaster bowls from Dalma Island forces us to ask a really fun, provocative question. Is our modern consumer culture really any different from our ancestors 7,500 years ago? We still cross oceans for trade, we still obsess over imported luxury goods, and when we can't afford or find them, we still create convincing knockoffs to show off to our neighbors. It turns out the human desire to connect and display status is as old as civilization itself. I really hope this explainer gave you a whole new appreciation for the ingenuity and the totally relatable quirks of our prehistoric ancestors. Thanks so much for joining me.